What's up, guys? I'm GamerMD83.
No.
Uh.
So,
So,
here's the thing.
I think this is a perfect opportunity to record a podcast episode because we're both here in Burbank.
Yep. In person.
For a change.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost as though we've got a really good topic that's just walked around the corner and smacked us in the face and said, talk about me.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
We actually lived it.
Yesterday, no, the day before.
The day before.
We took to Google Maps and we started looking for game stores in Burbank because we're both visiting.
Mm-hmm.
We don't usually spend time here. And we found a couple.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just a couple. We were noticing that Burbank is it's a very, what would you call it? Open to gaming.
It's quite vibrant.
Yeah.
In terms of gaming culture, but what I found interesting certainly was the amount of retro stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Two stores popped up straight away.
Mm-hmm.
One was called Game Portal.
Yeah, at the Burbank. What was a Burlington?
It's in
Burlington?
It's in the mall attached to the Burlington store.
Yeah.
I forget the name of it. We can update that in a bit.
Yeah. Oh.
And there's another one which is just outside of the Burbank Center,
mm-hmm.
called Game Realm.
Mm-hmm.
And that was
good.
Brilliant place.
Yeah.
Really brilliant place, run by a nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, aside from all of the kind of trite stuff like brilliant stock, really good, modern and old hardware and software, there was this kind of whole back room bit where a lot of classic consoles and modern consoles were set up running games with their own TVs constantly,
Mm-hmm.
so that you could go and, you know, check it out.
That's one of the things that I loved about that place was the mix of modern and retro,
Mm-hmm.
because it was like, it wasn't just a retro game store or a GameStop where you could buy games that are coming out now. It was like just celebrating games in general.
Yeah.
It's just like games, these are the games that he probably grew up with, that he probably appreciates. And now, it's like we don't stop being gamers. If you're truly, if you really love games, we're always going to be gamers. We're
True
always
enough.
going to appreciate it.
Yep. And, I was stunned at the stock that they had.
Mm-hmm. And even when you first walk in, the first thing you see is just like books on art and like
it was like the art of Last of Us.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
The art of Uncharted, or
I love that setup that he has, because it's very much like, here's, it's like I said, it's just an appreciation of games. Like, here's how they were made, here's the art books, and then you go in and you see all the games and the like the little keychains and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
things to decorate whatever you want. And then you go into the back and it's like, here's some games that if you want to play. Here's, on the Switch, on the NES. It's great.
So if you imagine that space, it was a fairly large kind of hall area, and there were TVs bolted to the walls, and there was a console attached to each TV, and there were about 8 or 10.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a very large space and lots of folding tables, and on the wall, adverts for like community meetups.
Yeah.
And events and competitions. So it's clear that it's it's a bit of a haven
Mm-hmm.
for like-minded people to kind of come together and test their might.
Oh God, I was just thinking I would love to have a place like that just close to home, because I would just go there and get my games there.
And I'm sure there are like the community. I mean, Edmonton has I think it's called the Beercade, or the Barcade. I can't remember. But it's part pub, part amusement arcade, and it's a really good place. There's lots of the kind of tabletop-y gaming places where you take your board games and you set it up on a table and you can play for 10 or 12,000 hours. And they're very popular at the moment. But yeah, retro stores. I know of one in Edmonton. Oh, two.
Mm-hmm.
One's called Game City, and we've been there.
Yeah.
The other one's called Next Wave, and that's really good.
We didn't go there, huh?
No. There's two of them, I think. But, I'm sure it's really, it's assured me that it's not dying out. In fact, it's getting, it's becoming more and more popular. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the community's keeping it alive.
It's definitely the type of place that I want to support. Like, I prefer to buy my games from a place like that than, say, GameStop or something like that.
Or Amazon.
Because he had games that, you know, Nick, you got Sonic Mania there.
I did. I got Sonic Mania Plus for the Switch, and I've played a little bit of it. It's pixel perfect.
I was looking for one. Unfortunately, I think this game was probably just a limited time or something.
For physical copy.
Yeah, for physical copy. Owlboy, because he had a lot of Switch games, which is
I mean,
really nice to see.
Even had Okami.
Okami, oh god, I almost got that.
On an import.
Import, yeah, exactly, the Japanese version, and it wasn't crazy priced. Something that I would, you know, very, that was another thing. The prices there, some people would be like, oh my gosh, it's so expensive, but knowing the value of these things, I think it was very appropriate, the prices that he had.
So as introductions go, that's a fairly long one, but it highlights several topics that, you know, we've both been talking about and humming and hawing about, and we both feel there's this value in covering them. But I think the first is the kind of current duality between retro gaming and very modern stuff, the cutting edge stuff that, you know, the EAs and the Naughty Dogs make, and, you know, the big AAA stuff. But then there's a huge resurgence in retro interest. You know, I've just got a SNES Classic when I was in the UK.
And you see a lot of other companies doing it now too, remaking, you know, Commodore 64. You said even an actual size version.
They've been promising this on the website, and if you're, you know, if you've grown up in Britain, I'm not sure that the Commodore 64 was too popular in North America.
It wasn't, no. I think the Amiga was bigger.
Right. So the C64, I think, came out in 1983 and was hugely popular in Britain, and I think in Europe, but definitely when I was a kid, lots of people had them, and it was great. Billions of games available from, well, maybe not billions, but a significant number of games were available from it straight away, all on tape, cassette, or cartridge. And
you know, consoles, or not consoles, but platforms like the C64 and the Amiga were what kept gaming alive, because once the video game crash, you know, with Atari and everything, it was computers that kept the gaming industry going.
And I think it's because of homebrew and the demo scene, and you know, being able to write code in BASIC on your own. And, you know, people that, you know, there's a documentary called Bedrooms to Billions, and it's fascinating. If you get the chance to watch it, it's absolutely it's wonderful. And there's a sequel just come out called Bedrooms to Billions: The Amiga Years, and I need to watch that because I think it's going to be pretty amazing.
I haven't seen that, I think.
It's great. It's a brilliant documentary.
I'll have to see that.
I watched it with a mate of mine maybe 3 years ago, and he and I both grew up in the UK industry. He got in a little earlier than I did, but everyone that was interviewed, who he didn't know, I knew.
Really?
And then, you know, we just sat there one Saturday night getting slowly drunk, shouting at the TV, saying, "I know that guy." And, you know, several people that are still, you know, active in the industry in the UK. It's brilliant. And I can only imagine that the Amiga years is going to be something similar. But, you know, as I say...
we see a resurgence of the retro.
Yeah.
And I like it so much. Like, it's made... I think, you know... I think the reason that... You know how we say that we've... I think you haven't changed much, but... Because you've always been a fan of that type of gameplay, the video games, platformers and stuff like that, right? You've always been attracted to that type of gameplay over... like, being able to advance in skill opposed to...
Oh, I see what you mean.
You know?
Like, as opposed to RPGs and...
story
narrative based
like
stuff.
Yeah.
But then, you know, you're playing stuff in the you know, the late 80s, early 90s, and because of the limited tech, you either had, like, it was a kind of stripped down platformer or an adapted, ported arcade game like Outrun or what was the other thing? Midnite Resistance, which is a classic. If you've not played it, it's a spectacular little game.
Metal Slug and all that.
Yeah, I mean, we never saw those on the C64. It was
Oh,
just
you
a
mean
little
on the
bit too
C64,
advanced.
right.
Well, just in those years.
In the early years.
You had companies like US Gold and Ocean, and they were making some pretty important strides. But there was that, which relied on premise rather than storytelling. But then you also had games which were all about storytelling. You had text adventure.
Oh, right.
And you would just get pages of text. You are standing by a door. The door is painted blue, but it has gold trim. To the left of the door, there is a snail. Just about to eat the snail, there is a something or other. You know what I mean? Do you stop the something or other? Do you pick the snail up? Do you go through the door? Do you knock on the door? And there was an immense attraction to that kind of stuff. It captured the imagination and gave you decisions to make.
Yeah.
And I think, granted, it's on a totally different time scale. Like if you're playing Midnite Resistance, the decisions that you make are frame to frame. Whereas if you have a page of text, there's no timer. You just advance page by page and you digest the problem.
Yeah, it was like choose your own adventure books. I used to love those books.
The big frustration that I remember as a kid was more like was a frustration born out of go north. I can't do that.
Oh yeah.
And then it was because you'd done a lowercase g and go, or a lowercase n and north, and it didn't recognise it, and it was like, oh god, which pedant coded this? But then there were others. There was a game called Kobayashi Maru on the C64 that I remember being really good, and that was a kind of text adventure, but it was icons. So instead of go west, you go to the arrow that pointed left, or north was the arrow that pointed up, and south was down. And that was a really good way of doing it. And someone's, a lot of love was poured into that game. Definitely worth the 6-minute load time.
God, really? 6 minutes? Something like that.
Yeah. I remember Nick Faldo's... We're getting into C64 games now, but Nick Faldo's golf, I think, took 10 minutes to load.
Oh my god.
And it was a top-down golf thing.
Jeez.
Ridiculous.
What I was gonna say is that I think it's changed the resurgence of retro games since 2016 we started to see a little bit of a creeping in of more platformers, more pixel art type of games.
Well, I think even before this, like, the miniaturization of consoles was happening in generation. So, the Mega Drive 1 came out, and I think Sega was the first to do it.
Yeah.
With the Master System. The Master System 1 came out, and then a few years later the Master System 2 came out. And that gave the opportunity for streamlining manufacture, right? So the way that it generally happens with hardware is, as in console hardware, not peripherals, but the actual system is sold immediately at a loss. And then as you get on, maybe through the first 18 months, 2 years, costs for manufacturing go down so that you're making profit for a few months right at the end of that first period. And then you will find a way to make a component of it cheaper, or maybe RAM prices, more recently, stuff like RAM and CPUs and things. The cost of the components gets lower so that you can manufacture a console for less, you can sell at a profit briefly, and then you'd make a decision to do a slim. So you'd do, let's use the PlayStation 3 example, because that's the more stark example recently. When the PlayStation 3 came out, its RRP was $600 US, which is crazy. But each one cost $900 to make. So Sony was selling every console at a $300 loss for at least the first 6 months. So you only need to sell 10 million of those before you're $1 billion in debt. And you're not going to make the money back. You're supposed to make the money back on games and peripherals and licensing and all that kind of stuff, which I'm sure they did, but nowhere near quickly enough. But then you get to a point where they're thinking, okay, the LED, the diode for the Blu-ray drive is coming down in price. RAM cost is coming down in price. We can package everything smaller. Let's make a slim version.
Oh, right. And now it's even cheaper.
Because not only the components are cheaper, but they're cutting systems out. Like the PS3 Slim, the first generation, that was just about, reducing the price of the components and repackaging it. The one after that, it didn't even have a slot loading Blu-ray drive. It was, you slide the cover and then you put the disc on it. So they're even taking out engineering and mechanical complexity, so it gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And the goal is to be able to sell the hardware at a profit. And I think the only console recently that sold at a profit from day one was the Wii. Because it was made from off-the-shelf components. There was nothing specific in it.
Oh, wow.
So Nintendo, with Wii Sports, which I think is up there as one of the most popular best-selling games ever, mostly because of bowling. They were making a profit from day one. It's a great story. But I think, with the bigger, more expensive stuff, it's much more difficult. To loop this back to the original thing of miniaturization of consoles, I think it comes from a practical position, because console manufacturers, they get more life out of an existing hardware generation by making a smaller, more compact, cheaper to buy version. And then I think it was even, those consoles in the mid-80s, late 80s that had preloaded games on it. I remember I had a Master System 1 and that had Super Hang-On preloaded on it. And then I think Master System 2 had Alex Kidd in Miracle World preloaded on it. So we've got two components: miniaturization of the hardware and the preloading of games. And that's the recipe that people have gone on to make.
Yeah, but I think even that came first, definitely. That started to pop up first, where whoever, some companies or whatever, they started to re-release, or even, Microsoft and Sony, they started to integrate into the PS3, the PS4, the whole library, where they go back to, you could play the old Xbox games now. You could download the all those games that you used to love from the PS1, and it's like, oh, nice. That was already starting to go into the retro era, but going back and bringing those back, the resurgence, and then the mini consoles, bringing those back. But what really excited me, that changed me as a gamer just recently, was seeing the new evolution of retro gaming. Like, seeing the what was the first one that did it? I don't know. Cave Story, Undertale. Those.
Oh no!
Those are the new ones that look like they belonged in the past.
Yeah, we're getting into. I mean, this is a different space, right? I mean, this is homage, modern games that look like older stuff.
But still very, very retro.
Totally.
It completely plays on that idea of modern and retro. What we're talking about, it's the middle ground, I think, and it appeals so much to people our age that grew up with those games, but are very much into modern games. And kind of want, when you see something like that, I think that's why you and I love the Switch, because it's kind of that middle ground. It's that console that brings those things together, and I don't know, it just feels right on there, and like the Hyper Light Drifters and the Not a Hero.
Well, I've said to everyone that listens, which granted isn't many, but the thing that I love about my Switch right now is that I think, with the exception of Mario Odyssey, everything that I've got on there is pixel art platformer.
Yeah.
Or a retro puzzle. I've got like Lumines on there recently. I haven't got Hyper Light Drifter on there yet, but
only a matter of time.
It's only a matter of time. Fox and Forests.
That one is very retro feeling, isn't it?
Cave Story, Hollow Knight, as I say, Not a Hero, Sonic Mania. Let's not forget that. Celeste.
Oh.
If you've not played Celeste, Celeste's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
And very, very old school, very difficult, very much. It's just, it's very much, it's about dying. You have to die and redo it and redo it and redo it. By dying, you learn what to do and what not to do.
So, Not a Hero has got a similar mechanic. Not a Hero, if you've not played it, is it's a pixel art platformer with 4 goals that you've got to accomplish with every level. There is one main goal that you can't not get. You have to get that to finish the level. But there are 3 more goals. But, you know, playing it on the PS4, the trackpad, the touchpad, that's the reset button for that level. So if you know that you're going to fail, you press the trackpad, you go right back to the beginning of the level, and, you know, it's just about iterating. I'm not sure that Not a Hero tracks your number of deaths.
Yeah.
Celeste certainly does.
Yeah. It makes you feel so accomplished later. It's like, you know what? I'm proud of that.
I've played that quite a lot.
See, if it was a different game, if it was like Mario and you died that many times, I'd be so disappointed.
Yeah, but I mean...
I'd be like, oh my god, I suck at this.
But that's framing. I mean, if it wasn't for Celeste saying to you, don't be ashamed of a high death count, celebrate it.
Yeah, yeah.
You'd be like, oh my god, you know, I mean, a video game maker, I believe firmly that, you know, as a developer, you've got to use your powers for good. And if you're making your players feel bad by their performance through any mechanism, you're doing them a disservice.
They won't want to play it.
It's an entertainment. It's an escapist entertainment. And you don't cast scorn on your player. Or you don't make them ever think that it's the computer's fault that they've failed.
Yeah.
You know, if you as a player can legitimately blame the computer for your failure, game over.
Yeah, it's the worst feeling. That's rage quit right there. It's like, you know what, screw this game.
Yeah, screw this game and all like it. In fact, I'm going to go to the other platform because...
Yeah, exactly.
But when you reframe it to make the player feel awesome even in failure, winner.
Yeah,
Chicken
exactly.
dinner. To get back for a moment to the kind of miniaturization of consoles, we could kind of chart where it started and where it's going. Because there was a little bit of news that came out last week or a week before about Philips. But I think at games, and this is a kind of strange sweet spot between people liking ready-to-use, easily accessible and relatively cheap consoles with loads of games on them that they can plug into their modern televisions and play straight away. And the first one that I remember playing was an old Atari one, and it was just a joystick with AV cables that came out of it, and I think it had 8 games on it. And it was like Space Invaders, you know,
I know
kind
what
of stuff,
yeah,
Pac-Man, Centipede. And I think that, you know, that was about £12 or something. But it was an official Atari product, I think. From that, you get at games doing the Sega Genesis stuff, which, let's be honest, is really rough.
And you know, you have one, don't you?
So yeah, I got the Mega Drive 80 preloaded games thing as a gift a few years ago, last Christmas actually. And yeah, it's really, and I've got to be careful to not insult the people that bought it for me, because how are they gonna know?
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
It's a brilliant, perfect gift for me. But it's software emulation. You know, it's never going to be original hardware now. But the way that the music is emulated is terrible. The audio is terribly emulated as well. And, you know, the visual frame rate is choppy at best. Varies by game, but not by much. But then you've got, I think the very first one was the first officially licensed one was probably the NES Classic.
It was, yeah. Because that games also did Atari.
Right. And was it not very good?
I didn't hear very good things about it. I've seen it and I'm very, very tempted, but I'm kind of waiting for an official one.
Yeah. Well, the Atari box is coming out soon, which is their new...
I'm very, very excited for that.
So there was the NES Classic, and that sold like hotcakes. I've never actually bought a hot cake.
It's like a pancake?
Mm.
You're not missing out.
No. It's a funny phrase in this day and age.
A hot cake.
Anyway, SNES Classic, hot on its heels. The Genesis Classic has kind of been, or the Mega Drive Classic, if you're from the civilized world, that's kind of been on the horizon for a while. And then At Games were going to do it, and everyone went, oh, God. Ugh. And then last week, Sega said, yeah, no, we're going to keep gestating it for a few months longer so that you can get a really good thing. And everyone went, yay! So the Mega Drive around the corner, that's going to be a good thing. The C64 Mini, which is...
Already out.
I
think it just came out.
Yeah. A couple of build quality problems, but generally, it warms the cockle. If you're interested in that, www.the64.com. The C64.com. But on that website, they're also promising a full-size working keyboard version, hopefully made from the original molds.
I want that. But I want a little keyboard as well.
It doesn't work. It's solid.
I know, but still, I just want to have it.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
And then the PlayStation 1?
The PS1 Mini.
I'm excited about that one as well.
And you know there's going to be a PS2 Mini.
Oh, God, yeah. And you know there's going to be an official Atari one. I'm pretty sure. And in television, probably?
Well, Philips CDI, someone tweeted at Philips saying, when are we going to get a miniature CDI? For the two people that still know and liked what the CDI was. I'll admit I don't get it, because the whole thing with the CDI, it was the CD-ROM revolution of the mid-90s, the early mid-90s, right? Which Mad Dog McCree, if you ever saw that.
No, I don't think so.
It was a Western shoot 'em up thing with a light gun, but it was all digitized footage. So if you shot the guy on the balcony, it ran the footage of him falling off.
Yes, I did see that.
All of the FMV games like 11th Guest and or was it 13th Guest in the 11th Hour? I can't remember. All of the FMV puzzle games, Night Trap. But the CDI was basically the same kind of thing, because it was an interactive CD, right? It was CD video, and you choose your own adventure game. Why would you do that in a mini console? Well, maybe that's the exact reason. Maybe it's because no other console is doing that, and it's like, yeah, sure, I'll pay $70 for a CDI Mini. Yeah. Sure, the build quality's terrible and the games are rough as arseholes, but
it's small and it's adorable. Like, that's what I said in an MD Access once, was the miniaturization of anything is like, oh my God. I mean, would you prefer? I don't know if I should. Okay, yeah. Would you prefer a full-size cat or a kitten?
You're asking the wrong person.
Yeah, I would prefer a puppy and a kitten. Anything small is just adorable.
But then okay.
And when they grow, you just get another little puppy or a kitten.
The question you should have asked: would you like a model Ferrari or an actual Ferrari?
No, I shouldn't have asked that, because it totally goes against what I just said.
It does go against it.
That's but are you going to get a full-on Ferrari? No. If you had a little model, that'd be pretty cool. It would look nice on your little shelf.
Well, I've got a model Batmobile, and I enjoy that very much. But let's mimic the economics of the miniaturization of consoles. SNES Mini is what, £79. I think that's what I paid for it. Or £69,
yeah, it is,
or something. Yeah. To get actual SNES hardware and software, so an actual SNES with 2 pads, all of the cables, and 20 games, maybe you could get that for the same money.
Maybe.
It'd be a cold day in hell, but I reckon you could do it. Would you go for the miniature one, knowing that original hardware and software was going to be cheaper, which it probably isn't?
I'd go for the original.
Really?
Yeah. I'd have to get an old school TV though.
Yeah.
And that would be so cool. Because the point to all of that is the nostalgia. That's the key to all of this stuff. It's not so much that, oh my god, that game was so good. We all know that those games were very much, they were good, but they were like, they were what we played as kids.
Yeah. There's a fascinating idea that comes out of this. Well, I think it's fascinating anyway. We were talking a little bit yesterday about how a person changes over time, and I think what you were talking about was cereal, right?
Yeah, cereal.
So, yeah, expand a little bit on that, because I think this is going somewhere really interesting, I think.
Yeah, the thing, a few years ago, when I was a kid, I loved Lucky Charms. It was just so good to me. It has like those little marshmallows, and it was just really, really good. It was my favorite cereal as a kid. So a few years ago, I was like, you know what? I'm going to buy Lucky Charms because I want to remember how great this was. I want to have that smile on my face in the morning. And I go and eat it, and I was like, this is horrible. It just didn't taste good. It tasted way too sugary. And I was like, no wonder I liked it as a kid. It was good. It was sugar. But now it was just like, oh gosh, no. So it made me wonder about games, like games that I grew up with loving, adoring. If I were to go back and play it, would I feel the same way? Or would it just be, thinking about it, is it just the nostalgia? Is it just that memory of loving it as a kid? Or is it really as amazing as I remember?
Now, the fascinating thing that I think comes out of a question like that is, well, there's a couple of points, but the first thing that crosses my mind is, how do you work out whether it's you that's changed or whether it's the cereal?
Yeah.
Because how many years would it have been?
Maybe 20.
Okay, so 20 years, there is at the very least, the possibility of the recipe changing.
Yeah.
Or various Food Drug Administration guidelines that prohibits a particular ingredient or a certain amount of something. Mm-hmm. So between then and now, there's every chance that the recipe's changed. Mm-hmm. And what you're tasting now is, unrecognizable.
Something completely different, yeah.
And the difficulty is there is an absolute absence of box fresh, brand new, old recipe. Mm-hmm. You can't go back to whenever it was, 1998, and try that, because 1998 was 20 years ago. You can't go to the mid-90s and eat the food straight off the supermarket shelf and compare. It just can't be done. So you've got to trust that it's the same. And, with a video game, it's measurably the same. You could get original hardware, the original cartridge, the original pads, and somewhere in the world there will be brand new versions of all of those things.
Yeah.
And you can play it, and you know that it hasn't changed. And if you feel differently about it, you've changed.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And where this goes is, for people of our generation, video games prove a really, really interesting benchmark to measure your own growth by, measure your own progress by.
Yeah.
How your tastes have changed, how your
opinions.
Yeah, how your reactions have changed.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Mechanically, you can play a game that you had problems with, and maybe you'll get further, maybe you won't get as far, but it occupies a really important space for us now. And in entertainment forms, if you're not familiar with Dara O'Brien's he's a comedian, stand-up comic, and he's brilliant, but he speaks very passionately and knowledgeably, and he's got brilliant insight in video games, video game culture, and what they offer. And one of the things that he says is, it kind of stands alone in art, in that it makes you earn progress. Mm-hmm. When you're reading a book, unless you find a book desperately tiresome, in which case you'll probably more likely put the book down, but you don't relish the challenge of getting through a tiresome book to the end. Mm-hmm. I think that's the only way that a book could really challenge it, beyond difficult subject matter.
Yeah.
But with a video game, it's that kind of thing that spurs you on and on and on to unlock more and get further in and stuff.
Yeah, and to feel that you've actually advanced in not only the game but also in your skill if the game is tied to skill.
And I I'm a firm believer that games should be tied to skill. If you earn progress, which you should, I think progress, the reward should be because you've mastered the skill set, or you've got better at using the tools that the developer empowers you with. And then it's a mastery and a virtuosity of the use of those that you eventually are rewarded for. It's not simply getting to the end of it.
I find that concept so interesting, the concept of us changing, because I definitely do think that is the case with me, because I have a SNES Mini, or an SNES for you guys that call it SNES, Mini, and I was really excited to play these mini games, the games that I grew up with, the Marios and the Kirbys and all that stuff. And I was playing it, and I played for it maybe for 30 minutes. And then I was like, oh, okay, that was fun. And I turned it off, and I haven't turned it on ever since. And it kind of makes me sad, because it's like, I thought I'd be playing this constantly. It's something that I love so much. But it also made me realize that maybe I have obviously a different appreciation for it now than I did when I was a kid. Back then, it was what I had. It was what was new. It was the magic at that point. And now it's not. I mean, there is a magic there, but it's more because of memory. It's more because of this was what I loved when I was a kid, and there's always magic in that. But it's not the same anymore. It's not that. Yeah, I'm not a kid anymore.
So here's a thought. For every one game that is amazing and beautiful and brilliant and amazing and beautiful and brilliant, there are about 15,000 that are schlock, right? There's a hell of a lot of shovelware out right now. Back in those days, late 80s, early 90s, I think, and this is not counting the kind of underground, the demo scene and homebrew and all that kind of stuff, but I mean the officially published console games, let's limit it to. I think there was far fewer in total back catalogues, but I think the quality is generally higher. That's the assumption. And I've been recently in a position where I can play lots of Genesis games and compare them back to back, and the quality varies so much. But what I was getting to was, I think there was a notion of video games being dessert. And when you're a kid, all you want to eat is dessert, right? As an adult, that dessert occupies it should occupy a very kind of minimal space on your menu. And I think to play those games again, it's a big, bright, colourful, sugary treat, and you can only take it in small doses.
Yeah.
But I think something else is, right now, the spectrum of video games offers, to continue the analogy, a completely different landscape of menu items and nutritional value. Like, you have stuff which is far more nutritional, and you've got stuff that is far more narcotic. And you have like the World of Warcraft and the Eves, which you have to put in 14 hours a day to be relevant in. And then there's the after dinner mint, where the after dinner mint for me is Ikaruga, because I can only play it once, and I can only play it for about 4 or 5 minutes. Dessert is something like Not a Hero.
Yeah.
Or if I need a bit of a workout, Lumines, and I'll play Lumines for an hour and a half. Dragon Age. Dragon Age is like Christmas dinner.
Oh yeah, Dragon Age is
Inquisition,
everything put together.
Right. Well, Dragon Age is it's a 700 or 800 course meal that
Yeah.
lasts months, and
Yeah.
there are nutritional elements, there are dessert elements, there are popcorn elements, there are definitely narcotic elements, but it's really strange.
But ironically, the interesting thought that I just had was that now as kids we want the dessert always, and now it's like, okay, I won't have too much of that. But there's also the opposite feeling, and I know that this is true for me. I don't know for you, but when I was a kid, I didn't appreciate things like I do now. Like when I was a kid, I'm sure those games that I look back at, those games that I think of, where I'm like, oh my god, that was a brilliant game. Let's say Tetris. Now I appreciate it so much. But as a kid, I'm sure I didn't appreciate it as much as I do now. I'm sure that it was just a puzzle game that I would play and then I wouldn't play it anymore.
But you see, that feeds into that other thought, that the other point that I was talking about earlier. As a benchmark to measure yourself by, I think Tetris is far more meaningful now.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to Tetris Effect when that becomes available, because I want to see how good I am.
Yeah.
Lumines right now is the benchmark for me, and as it goes, I got far higher on Lumines for Switch, Lumines Remastered, than I ever did on the original for PlayStation Portable.
Really?
So I maxed out at about level 108 on PlayStation Portable. I got to level 168 on the plane down to California.
Wow.
Is that me changing? Is that the game changing? On a technological level, resolution of the Switch is higher, response times might be lower.
Yeah, but there's very few ways that Lumines could actually change. They could add things, but I don't think it could change much.
You wouldn't risk changing the form.
No, and then it wouldn't be Lumines. It'd be something else.
It's kind of crazy, and I like that, but the temptation to power up my old PlayStation Portable and play Lumines and see if I've changed, it goes back to that thing where maybe it's me. Have I changed?
Yeah, I absolutely think it is. Like me, I know when I was a kid, I played the violin. When I was 8, I started playing the violin. And I stopped when I was 12 because I hated it. I was like, oh, this is so boring. This is such a boring instrument. I want to play something more exciting. And now I hate that I stopped playing the violin because I think it's an absolutely beautiful instrument. And I'm like, oh God, if I had just stuck with it, I'd know how to play the violin. And it's just gorgeous, and I stopped playing it because I hated it. You just appreciate things more now because you absolutely do change. You don't have the mentality of that child anymore.
Well, I think there's, hindsight is always beautifully focused, and I think the tendency to want to recapture lost opportunities, I think, is inherent. Without sounding too Star Trek, as a being that lives in linear time, knowing that you've got a fixed amount of it and you can't go backwards, and you can only go forwards at the rate of 1 minute every minute. The older you get, the imagination tends to fill up with how you could have been.
Oh yeah.
Similarly, I started playing the piano when I was about 8 or 9. Should I have continued? I don't know. Would I have liked to? Yeah, of course. If you hear someone playing the piano beautifully, you think, if I'd have worked harder, that could have been me.
Yeah, exactly.
But you don't know what's going to come up. You don't know. Like, both of my parents my mum has, my dad had rheumatoid arthritis, and that got in the way of his playing. He was a pianist and an organist and very, very, well practiced and skilled musician, and certainly gifted as he believed. Who's to know that my knuckles wouldn't be ravaged by that and get in the way of me becoming a virtuoso? I don't know.
Yeah.
Given my youth and what I knew about myself back then, would I have worked that hard? Absolutely not. I was, as a kid, lazy. It took for art to take over, to give me purpose.
Yeah.
And then I worked very, very hard. Would piano have taken away from visual arts for me? Possibly. Would that have been acceptable to me? No.
No. Yeah.
No. I can't doubt my path because my path's been very good to me.
Yeah.
Video games, work and play. There's very little that I would change, and I feel very lucky to be in that position.
I think it's also is also an interesting idea of time, because when you're a kid, time is so long. You know what I mean? Like, it's like you got all the time in the world, and sometimes that's a good thing for you. It's like, oh, I'm gonna be a kid for a long time, but then it's also a bad thing because it's like, oh, Christmas is taking too long to come, and I want that thing or whatever. So you kind of feel like you have all the time in the world when you're a kid, and now time just goes too fast, and you're just like, I don't have time for this. I don't have time to sit here and play hours of this game. I want something quicker. I want something that I don't have to really think too much. I just want to get away from
whatever it is,
work or whatever. I just want to sit down and relax for a little bit and then turn it off and go back to it tomorrow or something.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, there's a couple of things like to react to that. I think it's time as a percentage of your life. Like, for example, when you're 10, 1 year is 10% your life.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels much longer.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're 40, a year is a 40th of your life, and it goes by in what feels like a matter of weeks.
Yeah.
Right? You know, we were in Edmonton a year ago.
Yeah.
For the end of September, the beginning of October, and that feels like it was yesterday.
It does, yeah.
You know, I have photographs of it, and it was like yesterday.
Yeah.
We were all in the Rockies for Christmas last year. That doesn't feel like 10 months ago.
No, it doesn't.
Unbelievable.
God.
And similarly, I moved over to Edmonton to work for BioWare 6.5 years ago, and that's flown.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where I now no longer work for BioWare. I'm just about to embark on something very new and very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
But time does fly, and the older you get, I'm sure the faster it goes. You just gotta stay busy and stay interested in stuff.
Maybe that's why we're getting old. That's when you know you're getting old, when you get back into retro, where you're like, you know what? I don't have time for these big, huge RPGs. I'm gonna go
I'll just
into
have a little slice of cake.
These little platformers that make me smile.
Can't stop for a proper meal. So I'll or for a night and day compulsion or addiction.
Yeah. Unless it's Dragon Age, then it's like, okay, yeah, I'll sit down and I'll.
But I mean that's like. The Edmonton winter is perfect for a game like Dragon Age. In fact, playing Dragon Age Inquisition, I remember early November 2014, I went into Dara's office and stole, with his permission, and took one of the PlayStation 4 discs, because he had the first run. And it's a disc that I still have.
Oh, I remember that.
And I was playing Inquisition for about 10 days leading up to... The release. And it was kind of strange because it was before the day one patch, we managed to finish it. There were not an awful lot of bugs in the PlayStation 4 version of Inquisition. The PC was a little bit more buggy. But Sony did a console update that basically made it incredibly unstable.
Yeah, I remember that.
And you couldn't play it for 2 minutes without it crashing to black screen or something.
Mm-hmm.
But it was early November, and it was the game that I just left everything behind to work on, and there was snow on the ground, and it was cold in the air, and
you just hibernated.
Yeah, just playing this game and listening to that music and looking at all of our hard work in the comfort of my own home on a nice TV and warm inside, cold outside. It's very much a winter game for me.
Mm.
I think I want to retire to the hinterlands. That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
I got a Neo Geo Gold or a Neo Geo X about 5 years ago when they were new, and it marked it's a really important thing, and I think there is a sweet spot right now between popularity and marketability and fashion. When a thing is popular enough and the fashion of the time lends itself to that being a sensible item to own and buy, you can really cash in.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of people cashing in. I know the one that people want is the N64 Mini.
Oh, you know it's coming.
I know it's coming, but they've got to do it at the right time. Part of the appeal of the NES Classic is rarity. It was a must-have a year ago, 2 years ago, whenever it came out, because you couldn't get one.
Mm-hmm.
NES Classic was the same. Nintendo know this, and I'm sure they're trying to find a way to package the N64 Mini in such a way that it completely evokes the feel of the time. I think one of the biggest disadvantages that you get with the miniaturization of this stuff is, as the consoles get more complex, so do their controllers. The 3-leg N64 controller is a fairly complex piece of hardware.
Yeah.
And you can't keep it in its optimum price point because you're basically making one of the first analog stick joypads there was.
Yeah.
Right? And you've got to make sure that it's compatible with the emulation, because you assume it would be emulation. Licensing of all of the software, making sure that there's no frame drops, making sure that the price of the console hardware as well as the joypads is reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
The N64 also had 4 pad inputs on its front, didn't it?
You mean like the buttons?
Sockets on the front of the console.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it did, yeah.
So how are they not going to ship it with 4 pads? Or are they going to ship it with 2 and have you, buy extra?
That would be very Nintendo.
But it would be very expensive.
Yeah.
You couldn't go from 0 to GoldenEye for less than...
That's a good question. I wonder what they would do. I don't think 4 sockets would even fit on a Mini.
Depending on how they designed it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but it would have to be Mini, at least in size, in ratio to the SNES and to the NES.
So,
Mini.
This is an interesting problem that they've got. Do you make the N64 pad, the original one, compatible with the Mini console? No, because the socket is massive. As I remember, it was a decent thing. Or do you make new pads with mini USB or USB-C, or a really small socket that you can buy off the shelf? Because let's strategize. Let's make a mini console right now. Let's say, what do you need? You need storage. You need a CPU, probably a Raspberry Pi or an Android-driven thing. You would need sockets for power, sockets for HDMI, sockets for the joypad. What do you buy off the shelf for cheap, but also allows you to make bespoke stuff? Because if you've got a standard USB, yeah, it's cheap off the shelf, but people will want to plug any device in, and that's not good enough.
Right.
You've got to have something that's a little bit, a little bit bespoke.
Well, what about like the socket for the SNES?
If Nintendo have made enough of those, that becomes cheaper. So you can fill your N64 Mini with this kind of stuff. But it also means that you've got to make custom 3-pronged analog stick joypads for that console. And that's an expensive venture.
Yeah.
And you've got to fit their cables with the digital connectors. It's no longer an analog pad, it would be a digital pad. And that gets expensive. So you're talking 80 for the console, perhaps. 25 at the very least for the pad. 40 maybe, more realistically, for the pad. So to get 4-player on an N64 Mini, because GoldenEye was 4-player split screen, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah.
And was Mario Kart 4-player split screen? 4 pads, let's say $250 a pad. $200 for 4 pads, and then the console over the top. It's almost $300.
Yeah, no.
And for $300, you could get a nearly new PlayStation 4 for that.
There's no way they're going to make it 4 players.
No. Or they make it backwards compatible with the original pad. Somehow.
But then it would have to be the same socket.
Or they make a converter.
An adapter, yeah.
So, in terms of problem solving, there's an awful lot with the N64 Mini that they would have to...
But I think more than anything, more than price and all that, it just wouldn't fit. 4 would not fit on that tiny thing. If it was in ratio to the SNES and the NES, which it should be, because then you could have them all together and they would be in ratio. There's no way they're going to fit 4 on them.
You mean physically fit 4 sockets onto the console?
With everything that comes inside, there's no way they're going to fit 4.
If they maintain the design of it and they miniaturize the original design, there's no way you could do it. You'd have to change how it looked. You could put sockets on one side and on the other side, so that it was, you know.
Yeah, true. But
Or you could change the shape, and they're not going to do that.
They're not going to do that. No, I think it's just going to be 2.
Or wireless. Bluetooth pads.
They would have made wireless for the SNES and the NES.
Not to keep the price low. Because, you know, wired connectors are going to be cheaper than...
It's going to come with wired, and they're going to sell wireless.
You think?
Yeah. Maybe that's how they do it. They make it that it's 4 players, only 2 connected, and you buy the other 2.
Maybe.
If you want 4.
It's a discussion that could rage on.
Oh, yeah.
So I think we've asked a lot of questions. It feels like there's maybe another podcast episode in this discussion because...
I think so. I think we're probably going into a different topic already.
Well, we're talking about the kind of logistics and the actual nuts and bolts problem solving that you would have to face with this kind of stuff. And as consoles got more complex, to make something that is cost effective that people could like buy on a whim, I think that's the thing. Yeah, it gets much more challenging.
But yeah, it's been a good topic. It's something that we are constantly going back to, you and I. We constantly live because we are very much into retro. We're very much into modern. We're excited for all of those retro goodies that are still coming out.
Yeah.
They're still on the high. I think they're getting even more popular now, which is really exciting. But also the big, we're also very excited for the big games coming out as well. I think we should definitely get some footage of that place, that retro realm.
I think there's an M Days in there.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Wicked.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Please stay tuned for some more podcast goodness from us. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you guys later.